Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session of the J Champions Conference. My name is Barry Bird. Our speaker today, or at this hour, is Mohammed Taman. He's going to talk to you and ask you the question, do you use the optional class as it should be? Mohammed, take it away.
Thank you very much, Barry, for moderating me. It was my pleasure to see my dear Java champion as well. And hello, everyone, for joining my session. Welcome to the 4th annual Java Champion Conference. And I hope that you enjoyed the previous speeches from and sessions from previous great, amazing, speakers. And you will enjoy the other 3 days, and I'm pretty sure of that. Welcome back again. My name is Mohammed Taman. I'm working as a Chief Solution Architect, and I'm Java Champion, and this is why I'm happy to join my home conference, Java Champions Conference. So the question today, as Barry mentioned, do you really use optional class as it should be? And it's not about the optional class or any other classes. This was like an argument class, to be honest. And since Java 8, it was out there. And when you are working with team, leading team, trying to review code, you see a lot of like usage of specific classes. One class that caught my attention is optional, and how the people really love it, using its basis and doesn't know or aware of all the other methods inside this class. And sometimes even this class has some methods that is misused, or sometimes we have anti-pattern. So I would like to deep dive to give you like 25 plus recipes that how to use optional class in optimal way, and that literally could benefit you from daily to day job. So regarding, I'm Java champion. I like to share my knowledge. I have an opportunity to write some books long time ago and author some video training. As you have seen for Pact Publishing, I was frequently writing for Java Magazine, and we hope that it will return back again. I have some publications on FAQ, Oracle Magazine, and IBM Developers, which is IBM Works now. And this presentation already, I have wrote a very detailed explanation about each recipes on these 2 links. I will share my presentation with you right after the session. So you can just click on it, on those, any of those like links, and they are complementary to each other. So it's all about what we are going to say today, but in more even examples. If you'd like to have any questions about Java Indeed ecosystem or anything related to this session or anything else, you are always welcome, because we are happy to be from the community to the community. So let's deep dive. In order to have the best of this session, I have categorized my agenda into 5 questions, actually, based on what I have seen and experienced from the code base. First one, like, sometimes I found like people guys, hey man, I'm using optional, but I still getting null pointer exception, and I supposed not to get it. Like, let's see what is the cases that people getting this null pointer exception, although they are using optional class. Second one, like, okay, what to set or return when there is no value present in optional? Do we have to throw exceptions? How to return values? Do we have to write a lot of code to do this? We will see some examples how we avoid. How to consume optional values effectively. This is very important. And how to avoid anti-patterns. This is very important as well, because you can introduce performance hit and costs and memory problems just because you are obsessed of using something. And finally, how to use optional professionally with some other APIs, or how to make use of it during testing and these kind of things. So buckle up, let's deep dive to make use of our time. So first question, as I have mentioned, that I get from developers, like, I'm getting null even when I'm using optional. And they think that optional just make you survive from null. Once you use it, there is no null exception has to happen, which is wrong, because it's a reference class. And based on how you use it, you get it. First thing that I have seen from junior developers always, like, if there is no, they are initialize the optional to be null, and then expecting that if there is no values, they will return this optional normally, and the caller will try to get this optional class to call some methods, and they will get null pointer exception. So I'm asking these guys, like, why you are doing this? And even though it's not correct, but I want to understand the idea behind it. They say No, we're trying to initialize it with empty values or something like this at the beginning so we can make use of it. So in order to initialize an optional, never ever assign it to null, you have to use empty method. So the caller can then check about the presence of the value or not. So you avoid null pointer exception this way. It seems trivial, but it's very important because I have seen it. So we are getting from the normal, minimal, like things that you have seen and up to the more professional, complex situations that we will see later on. By the way, pay attention to this kind of legend here since Java 8, which means this method of optional class has been already exist since Java 8. What does it mean? Based on your usage, either you're using Java 8, there is methods has been introduced in Java 11, and Java 14, and in these kind of versions. So you would like to know which version this method has been introduced in order to make use of it in your code base. So let's see another example. And never call also optional.get directly to get the value. So if you have HR service, which getting employee, and you would like to just get the employee, and while you're not making sure, calling it directly, it will throw no such element exception. In this case, you didn't even know there is exception, there is value exist or not. So what to do in this case? It's better to use definitely is presence. So if it's is present, that means that there is a value, so you can get it. Else, do something else that does not call employee.get. So another one, don't use null directly when you have an optional and need a null reference. Sometimes we need to use null. Imagine this case that we are using reflection API to call a method on a class. And first, we're trying to contain, we would like to call class and to get an instance, and then to get the method from that instance as a declared method, which also returns string. And we would like to check if the class is present, then I will make invocation of this method on that class because it's an instance method. If it's a static method, then I will invoke without the class the method called test. So sometimes this is like the code from 8 to 12 is more verbose. So we can avoid all of this using just one neat line of code, which we can use my class instance, or else null means if there is an instance means it's instance method. So I can invoke it on that class. If this class does not exist, it will return null. And in this case, I will invoke the method normally as a separate, as a static class, and to call the method test that we have introduced previously. And you should avoid using null, but in this case, it was mandatory for us to use null directly, but I'm just trying to make our code less verbose. So let's see the question number 2 that we have facing, what to do when value is present. Yes, I would like to return it, or sometimes I would like to do something else. And I always see one only pattern people are using, which is this one. Definitely, this is the common, is present, then get the value, or if not, then using else to return some other values. So imagine that I'm having a default user status, and I'm getting user status by ID, and it return an optional, and I would like to check this is the correct way. Also, by the way, status that is present, if it's okay, exists, I will return the value to avoid no such element exception. If it's not exists and doesn't have status yet, I will return the default status unknown. So yes, it's correct, but why we have to use this? We can make it more elegant, and we have methods for this. You can always use or else, but be aware of something. Use an or else for already constructed default objects. So what does it mean? I will give you another example so you can understand it. So in this case, to solve this previous problem in more elegant way, I'm checking here. If the status is exist, it will be returned automatically, which is inside the optional class. If it's not, please return unknown. So I'm voiding 4 lines of code and substitute it with line of code using or else. So don't use or else for setting or returning a computed values. Sometimes I see such a code. So I have a computation, especially imagine that you have a REST API call. And in this case, for example, imagine that compute status is something that has to do something like using some other code, calling database to check the default status, and or some other statuses to compute it if the original status of the employee does not exist. So in this case, I can use or else to not use is present or else, but there is a trick here and tip that you have to take care of. If you are using or else, this method compute status will already going to be executed, either the status already exists for the employee or not, which means wasting more cycles and computation, and you need to avoid this. I can give you an example. For example, you are using, like, as I mentioned before, like you have a call for REST API and you would like to check the value in the cache. If it exists, you would like to return it, but if it's not, sometimes I see people use or else, call the database to fetch this data and then set it in the cache. And if it's not even exist in the database, throw exception or something like this. But what if you find this value in the cache? Using or else will allow the code to compute fetching the data from the database also, which is performance hit, which was not the goal. Why I'm using cache in this case? How to solve this problem? It's very easy. Just to use is present get. Yes, people use this to avoid, but this is not the most elegant way to do it. So I'm truly avoiding this, and I will use or else get, which use supplier. It takes supplier. Lazy computation. So the same code, but I'm just using not or else. No, I will use or else get. So in that case of the example that I gave it to you about the API method that you call in the cache, please use or else get. Because once the value in the cache exists, it will be returned, no database execution will happen, and you avoid this performance problem. So use or else get when there is any computed, computation should happen to return a value. If it's always completely static, it doesn't matter. Use or else because it's a static. There is no computation running here. It will return just the static value. So this is also performance tip, very important to know about. Okay, sometimes like I want to throw an exception if if there is value it does not exist, and people using this. No such element exception or null pointer exception or illegal argument exception. Use whatever you like, but this is the case that people use. Sometimes we use no such exception. In this case, you don't have to use this kind of form because it's lengthy and verbose. And the elegant way to use this is just or else throw. But be aware, and this is since Java 10 has been introduced. So what if I would like to do this and I'm using Java 8? There is an alternative solution. We can speak about it now. So again, I don't need to throw that exception. I need to throw a legal state exception or any exception of my choice. So in this way, either I will use is present get again, or there is a very neat method that we can use. It's called or else throw that will allow you to throw any exception of your choice that is reliable for this code. So, and it's since Java 8. Question number 3. Now we knew what to set, what to throw, how to consume data, how to return it, to set the values. Now we need to consume optional effectively. How to do this? Let's see some recipes that I have encountered during my code review and technical discussions. So again and again and again and again, don't use is present get to do everything or to do nothing if the value is not present. So sometimes, okay, I have an optional status. If the is present, I would like to do something. The status is here, just to print it. So in this case, I will use if present in one line, and that's it. If the value is present, I will do something. That's it. I don't have to use this kind of else, if, and rather than I have, present. This is very trivial example to print the value, but you can do like calling for methods, and you can see it's lambda, so it's even lazy. It will not be called unless the value is exist. Let's see this one. What does it mean? Don't use is present get again to execute an empty based action if the value is not present. So you can see here, if the value is present, I will do something. And if it's not, I would like to say that the status is not found, and which is, nothing, just printing or logging that the status is not found. So instead of writing all of this code from 3 to 10, we can just, replace it with one single statement that we can use if present else to consume optional value if present, or execute an empty based action if not. Something very neat like this. So I'm asking, hey, status, if you are present, please print your value. And if it's not, please log or print that the status is not found. One line, and it's more readable. So, but be aware that this is since Java 9. I'm pretty sure that most of you are using Java 11 onward or stayed in Java 8. So don't use is present get again and again and again to set or return the other optional where no value is present. So sometimes I have optional I have a status that it came from database or something for some employees and it returned. And in this case, my fetch status should return not the direct value, but another optional. So I have default optional. In this case, I would like just to check if the status is present, I will return the status, or I will return the default status if it does not exist. So in this case, we are having here another optional, and we use this code for checking. So how to avoid this lengthy code? It's very easy to use or else get or all else to do this job. But even though you can see it's really complicated to construct because I have to create an optional of string, of pending, and this is not that good. There is one simple, lovely method that we can use, which is or just dealing with optionals. So either I can have declaration for this empty or pre-default status like this as in line number 4, and I can just use a status, do you have the value, or you should return default value. And instead of all of this, I can just, create one statement to say status or optional of binding, and that's it. It's more concise even than using or else if, which need a more construction and more neat statement. And again, it was since Java 9. So what to do with Lambda? If I use is present get with Lambda means I'm breaking the chain, I'm breaking the code. As you can see, I'm here getting product stream, and I have a product list, and I'm getting the stream. I would like to filter based on the price and find first. And then I check the product at the end. If it's present, I would like to have this product name. If this product does not exist, I will return not found. But this is like breaking change and sometimes like misleading, and it's not readable. So in order to make it more readable code, we can just, instead, like it's breaking the chain again, avoid using also something like this. I will not use is present, I will use the map of the optional in order to do this. But this is again and again breaking the chain. The other more solution to avoid this also is to call it like this. I have a product stream and I do the filtration as I want. Find first actually return an optional, and you can call map. If the first element already exists, the map will, you will get the product and get the name, and it will be returned. If it's not, it will return not found. So one call, one chain, more readable, more, easier solution. So don't check for values to throw an exception, as I told you before. Like, for example, you have a cart and it's an optional, and you have a product, and you would like to check if the cart is not empty, which is present, And also that cart, if it's not containing this product that I won't like to check, please throw no such element exception. So this is, it's okay. I'm not saying it's wrong. Most of this code is okay, but there is another way, either performance hit or memory hit, or even more readable. And there is methods made for this to make it less verbose. So in this way, we can use or else throw with lambdas. So it's very easy to like cart the filter. You can filter the cart directly based on this like product, if it's contained the product, and then if it does not contain, and the cart will, if this product does not exist, will throw an exception. Sometimes we overuse, and by chaining its methods for a single purpose of getting a value. Can you imagine? I have a status, and I would like to get this status, and I'm trying to check with optional, is this status or null or something like this? So I'm using optional of nullable. If there is a status, return it. If it's not, return pending, which is the default. Why I'm using optional while I just can use it easily with our ternary operation. Like if status equal to null, either return pending or return the status if it's not null. It's very easy, but it's more straightforward and more readable. Even sometimes, as I told you, sometimes we love to use the class or the methods to look elegant or to look like fancy that we're using something, but sometimes overusing things complicate things, like over engineering. So also try to be straightforward. Question number 4, which is the one that I like and I found too much while designing, especially in database entities, or sometimes even in Lombok optionals like records, or any argument of the constructor methods, designing an API, even I found a lot of anti-patterns like, I don't want to burn it for you. Let's see how it is. So when you are designing your API, please be aware of these kind of things. First of all, do not ever declare any field of type optional, because optional is another container, means another memory layer that you would like to have, your variable inside, to make sure that they are not empty or not nullable. And it doesn't work like this, because you can just assign a null to these values, and it's complicated to get the values from optional and set, and you're forcing your caller to try to use optional, and if they doesn't have, they have to create an optional empty instance to supply it for you, or if they are giving up, they just will give you a null, and that's it. So in order to avoid all of these complications, never ever declare any class or any field or instance variables as optional, instance of optional. Optional is a container meant to contain values for later on checking, not to be a value in itself. So the best definitely way, now, and you will lose all the IDE insights, all the kind of checking about the properties, and the frameworks to use this kind of Java Beans properties. This is the proper way to use, and you can use the getter methods, as we're gonna see, for optional. Another thing, that if these values need to be serialized, sorry, you will not find your field, because optional is not serializable. Excuse me. Do not use optional in constructor's argument, as I told you. Imagine that I have someone just wanted to have a postcode that makes sure this field may be null or not, so he would like to avoid having it. It's null, so he decided to declare it as an optional of type string, and then you're trying to create a constructor with the name, and this, then you have to pass an optional of string to represent that postal code, and then you have the getter method that return, and you just relying on this, which is completely overhead on the caller and doesn't make any sense in this context. So the better option is definitely not intended for use in constructor arguments, and this is a rule. means constructor argument means I will not have to use it inside the methods argument or sitters argument as well. We will see these cases, but just take it as a rule. So here, for example, I will stick to my first rule that I have instance variable as a normal properties, not contained in the optional. I will make my constructor more simpler. And finally, if you would like to return the value to make sure it's not null or null, it's easy to use optional of nullable, and you can return the postal code. So this is the optimal and proper way of doing this case. So this is based on the previous one. Using optional in sitters, I have found it like this. You're trying to sit it in the sitter value, which is complicate the things, and you don't have to use it in this way, which is, as I mentioned before, optional is not meant to use as an argument. So the better solution here is to just normally use sit as a setting property, and you have the getter again, which make the checking about the value, either it's nullable or not, to return it to the caller, and you are using optional. Argument in another common mistake, yes. So we have covered constructors, which is a special form of methods to construct objects. We have used sitters to set the values, and then I have to emphasize also for method arguments, because sometimes people have misunderstanding between the difference between them. So I can use it in method argument, but I will not use it in constructor or method setters because they have different purpose. No, all of them serving the same purpose. So imagine that we have a render customer, and we have cart, we have optional renderer, and also optional string, because I decided to do this because I'm expecting that the renderer might be null, and so I will use the default renderer, and the name, if it not exists, I will use anonymous or something like this. So I have here some checks, as you can see, and it's based on the render. If render exists, it's okay. If does not exist, I will throw a legal argument exception. And the names also, or else get, as you can see, anonymous. In this case, I don't have to use or else get even. I can use or else if I wanted to use it, because it's computed value. I'm just reviewing with you the base rules that we have said before, mentioned. And then imagine the caller of your code will be so happy, and is so well person, and will give you all and satisfy your needs. He will call it like this: render customer. He will give you the card, the most happy argument that he will give it to you. Then he have to create an optional of type renderer, of call renderer, new renderer. Like, wow, this is so pathetic and too much. And this is also okay. I don't have a name, so I have to give you optional of empty. But imagine that he can give you here null and here null, and thank you. That's it. To make it much easier, we avoid optional, and then the callers would be like this, and they can check about the nullability of the name using objects class, and there is method called require non-null or else get. So if the name is null, then I will return anonymous, so I satisfied the same conditions. I do the checking normally about nullability, so I require a render. Now I can just give you the card, new caller render, and null if there is no name. It's much easier than before. So sometimes I prefer to rely on null pointer exceptions. So this is here I was like relying on a legal argument exception. If you like to rely on null pointer exception, you can use objects require non-null. And finally, the same calling, it's a matter of the exception that you would like. And sometimes people prefer to avoid null pointer exception and use illegal argument exception or other exceptions in the same way. So you can develop your own class. This is like helper class called my objects, because it's not already exists. So I need to throw any kind of exception of my choice, business exception or illegal argument exception or any exception, not just only null pointer exception. So in this case, I created a method called require non-null or else throw. And then, I have here the type of the object and supplier exception supplier, that's row X, and I do the implementation here, and here is how can I use it. My object require not null or else throw. If this is not null, it will be this exception will be thrown. This exception also can be replaced with any exception of your choice. Okay. Another ADME pattern is to use optional to return empty collections or arrays like this. Can you imagine? I'm using container to contain another containers of data in order to see if there is item, this collection is empty or not. So this is not definitely a right way to do this, because optional, the collections and arrays itself has their own method to check about emptiness and things like this. So the best way is to rely on collections, empty list or empty map and empty set. So if I have a list and I'm getting the items, I can just check if the items not equal to null. I will return collections of empty list or the items that I have returned, or empty set in case of set, and definitely empty map in case of map. And more, avoid using optionals inside collection, which is complicating. And imagine that you have 100 or thousands of elements and you are initializing them of type optional, which is another layer of memory consumptions, which you have to avoid. You are trying to reduce the memory consumption and access to our data. And this is very complicated. In this case, like I'm putting an item and I'm making sure that it's not null, using optional of nullable and trying to return another optional of that value. And I have to use item the get number X. It will return for me option of string. And if item is not equal to null, I will print this key cannot be found. Else I will do wrapping or else not found. It's too much and it's not required by any mean. Don't use this. This is why we are asking and arguing everyone not to use optional inside collections, because it's costly and performance hit as well. So if you would like to do what you want to do, there is a bunch of methods inside collections to give you this kind of things. Like, for example, if I put an item here, I1 with shoes and item 2 is null, and I'm getting items I1, I2, I3, and it could be like first one will return shoes, second one will return null, third one will return not found. Why? Because just I have a small method called get, I have implemented it, and I rely on get or default. The key found, it will return it. If it's not found, it will return not found for you. So you don't have to use, optional in this case to check about the value existence or not. As well as you can rely on some methods and approaches such as contains key, trivial implementing by extending hash map to you to implement get, as you have seen, use Java 8 compute if absence, and also Apache common default map, the defaulted map could be used. And avoid doing this, please, because I have seen it also. You can guess it using map optional of string as a key, or both of them are optional, key and value. Please avoid it. Use optional of nullable instead of. It's the same concept of using, or else get. But yeah, we are trying to avoid computation. But here it's not computation. It's maybe even one and more concise. So imagine that you are calling fetch item name by ID, and the item name is coming. This may result in null value. So using optional off method on such null element definitely will throw null pointer exception, and you don't want to do this. And what is the solution here is to use off nullable, which check about nullability first, and if it's not null, it will wrap it in an optional and return it as an optional of that value. And if it's not, it will return empty optional. Vice versa, and this was since Java 8. Don't use optional off instead of optional nullable in case of pre-constructed values, because you would like to avoid this check. Here, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add any value. Why? Because you have to check about the value first, which definitely is not null. and then it will be wrapped and returned. So in this case, you just need to use off because it will wrap it and return it immediately as an optional of binding. It's a small things, but it's add up to the performance. I would like to ask you, why have to avoid something like this? And how can I solve it? What do you think? I'm using optional, you know, as a non-generic optional with numbers. So this is introduced something called auto-boxing. All of you are aware of that, and it's a performance hit, which is trying to convert, you know, these kind of integer-based primitive data types into a specific integer wrappers in order to assign it. And this is not good for the performance if you have a lot of computation like this. What is the best solution? Already we have thought about this, and the engineers in Oracle thought about this and give you optional int specifically for such things, optional long and optional double. Make use of them when you are dealing with non-generic optional to avoid boxing and unboxing. Question number 5 and the last one. I hope you get in good sights about the different methods, the different way of consuming, how to avoid performance, how to avoid, you know, memory code, and all of this. You can take it as a reference for you, and you also better to have the, you know, the 2 articles I wrote about it, so you can just have more insights and something that you can read and return to it whenever you would like to use, with real example from business cases, more than here even. So I like optional, so you know, I'm obsessed with it, and they would like to do some more things with it. So let's see what we can do more. There is no need to unwrap optional for asserting equality, something like this. If you are doing testing and you are getting, you know, some optional, you don't have to unwrap the value or to call get like this. Get directly. So it's instead, it's very easy. You can just assert equal and you can expect items, because the equal method inside always directly call get and the values has to be returned. Avoid using identity sensitive. Still, they are 2 different. You are here comparing optional instances, not the values. So you cannot do this. If you would like to check equality of them, just use .equal method directly, and equal method inside each of one of those using calling get directly. So you don't have to unwrap it. Recipe number 23. Avoid rejecting wrap. Sometimes I do using is present. What does it mean? Sometimes I have value, I would like to check about the properties of that value, then I rejected yes or no. So I would like to see if even the password exists. If it exists, I would like to check if the length is greater than 5 to return true or false. Is valid password or not, length. So in order to avoid all of this in one line, we can use filter. So optional has a filter method and available since Java 8. So you can just directly check about the string. If it definitely present, it will call filter, and filter will check about the length, and then you know, it will return after all of this is if it's present or not after this filtration. 24th, and this is if you would like to check about if the optional is empty, and this has been introduced since Java 11, as you can see. In this case, I get cart items, and this is maybe null, the cart, and it will return optional of nullable, and in this empty cart is calling this method, and this optional might be you know, present or not. So I'm calling, you know, cart is present in such case to indicate this cart is empty, doesn't have any elements or not. So in order to easily, it's a small change, but it's more readable. So I can use his cart is empty, if this cart is empty. So this empty method is introduced in Java 11. And if you don't have it, you can use the previous code, which is I have presented here using is present. Twenty-fifth, don't use is present to check the value first, then transform it. So we have a name which is maybe empty, and we need to transfer name this to upper name. So we are checking if the lower name is present, then I would like to use optional of the lower that get to uppercase and to make it uppercase, or else optional empty to uppercase because there is no existence for the lower name, then I will return the value as an optional. So I can do this in one line. We can use lower name.map and make the transformation. So we have here used map. What map here does? Map does two things. First of all, it will check about the existence and the nullability of this, the existence or the value of this lower name. If the value exists, it will do the transformation. Then, so map is, now I'm checking if the value is already exists in the lower name. Is it empty? No, it's not empty. So I will convert it to uppercase, and it will be returned as an optional of upper name directly. So this is the best case to do this transformation and checking using maps. Let me give you another example, very important to know what is the difference between, because also optional has map and flat map. So imagine that I'm using something like this. I'm doing this, like we have product, list the product, and we start to making filtration on the products, and they would like to filter based on the prices less than $50, and then please find first product. Since I get this product, I would like to get the name of this product. So if the product is present, please get me the name to uppercase, else is not found. The get method here actually return string. This get method that I'm using is returning string in this, in this case. So to use map here, and to avoid all of this breaking chain and using lambda, as I mentioned before, so we can use definitely product stream. I will filter, I will find first, then I will do first map that products.get name here returning string, as you can see, okay? And then I will, will return the name, and the map will do this kind of like optional, and it will pass to the next map, which will take the value, transfer it to another optional of uppercase, and return it. And finally, if it's not exist and there is no first element of all of this, it will return not found. So this is how I don't break the chain, and using map to achieve these transformations within the main lambda call of filtration of the products to get the desired product, or not found if the product does not exist. But what if the get name return optional of string? This is the second example to use FlatMap to transform values. The same code, but in this case, get name is returning an optional of get of string. So the same code runs, only the check here products.get name or else, or if it's found, please make the transformation. So how to use FlatMap here and when? Here, if I stayed if I stayed using here the map, what will be the return? The return will be optional of string. This is why we need to flatten that map, which is for the first element, because I'm using get name returning optional, and I need to flatten this optional to get the value and the check about it. This is why I will use flat map. So the big difference is the method call here, get name. If it return direct string, I will use map. If it return an optional, I will use flat map for this case. I hope it's obvious and doesn't introduce confusion, because sometimes it's introduced for the people who are using it. So the final recipe with us here is we Do we need to chain the optional API with a stream? Can we do this? For example, you have list of product IDs and you would like to have a stream and you would like to fetch product by ID. And this is fetch product by ID, which return optional or nullable of that product, only one product. Then you would like to filter if this product is present because it's optional, then do mapping to get the value, then collect all of them into a list which will return and one item in that list. So can I avoid this? Use optional.stream to chain, and this is the chain this kind of like and reduce the code. So since Java 9, so we call product IDs, we get this fetch by ID. In this case, I will use FlatMap optional stream, which will return a stream of that item if it exists. So, and it will return it in case in form of optional of that item. This is why I used here FlatMap. Then when it's returned, I will collect this value to be list of products. And this is how we can solve this problem. Also, we can convert optional to list easily. In this case, if you have an optional, you can have convert optional to list by using optional.stream.collect to list, and that's it. It will return a list of that item only. By reaching here, I have finished my presentation. I wish that you had some good insights, some valuable information, and I would like to have your questions if you have to me.
Well, Mohammed, I'm really glad that I decided to be the moderator for this, because this is a fascinating subject and a great presentation. I'm going to try to present some of the questions that came up during the talk. I'm going to be selfish and ask mine first, which is there a use case for or else as opposed to or else get? Is there a use case for an eager evaluation of the or else?
Eager evaluation for I didn't had such case to have this eager evaluation unless if I would like just to log something, to be honest. So even if it's present, I would like to log or to do some, some work behind. So I need to do something even if the value is present. And the only case I wanted to do this is sometimes it was logging because it was sensitive information. But rather than this, I didn't want to do it. Like sending message to some, broker in order to log this event, and that's it. But even because I want to do it while I have the value, but the most of the time, if I wanna avoid computation, the case that I mentioned about add database. No, in this case, I have to avoid using or else. I have to use or else get for lazy evaluation if the value does not present.
Okay, and we have the usual question: are you going to make the slides available, and if so, where?
Yes, I can share it. I don't know how can I share it now, but it's available on my in my slide deck. So if there is a comment on the presentation on YouTube, I will leave it out there.
Okay. Let me see if I can use this fancy feature of StreamYard.
We have a chat.
Wait, do you see the chat?
Yes, I see the chat.
I'm gonna try something fancy here. Show. Ah, there. Do you see that question?
Just 1 second. I'm trying to just to get share presentation. Yes. Link. No, just copy. Now, how to avoid null pointer exception when we have chained object like company.getManager.getInfo.get salary. Here is the company might be null and also the manager info or salary object. This is like a chain of, in this case, you have to have a separate or you have optional. optional. Each one of these has to return an optional, and then you can see like or else, or else, or else between them.
Oh,
Because this is like chained object. My company has a manager, which is like git manager, and git manager has a method that called get info, and get info has a method that get salary. All of them are chained by default. So in order to avoid this, you can make each one of these methods return return values as an optional. Then you can use or else, or else, or else.
all right. Here's one.
Close this. So I will share with you the presentation, if you can even post it on the YouTube. I hope that you can see it in private chat.
All right, I'm not sure, but okay. Did you see the latest question that I posted? Why is
sorry. I will join the chat. I will connect. It wants me to connect. I see many chats, yes.
Why is optional not serializable?
Because it doesn't have, it's not meant to be a value. It's container.
Okay.
It's a container. Same like this is the initial design, because you are trying to, it's not an object. It's meant to be like a container to contain a value to make some checking. So if you serialize it, you need to serialize this full graph and the values inside it with all this kind of like, you know, it's useless to do this with optional, because it's not meant to have this kind of optional, you know, as a value at the end to serialize it.
Right.
So this is why the design aimed to be not serializable.
Now there was a question that you, I feel, partially addressed, the differences between optional of and optional of nullable.
Yes.
And I have a couple of responses to your answer about when to use each or when to use either. And I'm going to kind of flash them both if I can. We'll do this one first.
So I don't think null check for constants can have a big impact in performance. Maybe it's also detected by the compiler and optimize it in bytecode. But this is why also we have, if you went to the method implementation, you will find that we have first checking about the nullability of the value, and then you will return empty optional in case of the value does not exist. In case of off, it's directly just wrap the optional inside the value wrapped with optional and return it, so it doesn't check. So if it's already null value, it will throw null pointer exception for you. The main problem, if you are just passed to off null value, it will throw null exception.
Okay.
It doesn't accept null values. The only null value is accepted by off nullable. So it will not throw an exception. It will deal with it, and it will return for you an empty collection in case of null. If it's not, it will return an optional with that value that has passed to.
All right, here we go with another one.
Optional t as a parameter type, won't it only accept object of type optional t and not of type s, where s is subclass of t? If s is subclass of t, you can substitute it. So it's normal generic. This is what I understand. You mentioned, like, if I have an optional of type t as a parameter type, won't it only accept object of type t and not of type s, whereas s is subclass? But why?
Okay.
It could be normally same like generics.
If we're
so if you have a number and you're trying to create an optional of like assigning of that optional, created optional of number, and you try to assign integer, it will accept it.
Alrighty. If we're not thoroughly answering the questions that you have, feel free to post follow-up questions in the chat. we can stay for longer than the assigned hour, although we, of course, encourage you to visit the other presentations that are starting at the other presentation that's starting
now I can post it with the guys on YouTube. Here is the presentation link. I hope anyone can confirm seeing this comment has failed to post Java Champion Conference. Really? Okay.
You know what it is? It's that Java Champion can post the URL on YouTube and a guest cannot. So we'll find some way of getting that.
Okay, I will go to okay.
Okay. One more here that I know of.
But option are the method parameter rather than return type. No. Yes, it's anti-pattern because it's introduced complication with no intention to do so. Like, why? Think about it. Why I would like to pass an optional as an argument. What is the value? It's not type. It's not parameter that I will make use of the value directly. It's just a container. So the container would like same like collections. You know, yes, we use collections in order to be passed, but it's a container of value. This is specific optional meant to be a return type from the initial design of Lambda expressions and Lambda and Stream API. When we design the Stream API, we need to have something like find first, find last, any match. It will return only one value, but you cannot return a null. And we wanted to avoid. So what can we return? Okay, because the value might be present or not. Then the idea of optional came out there. So any streams that has single return, it will return optional as a container for the meaning that there might be a value present or not. This was the initial introduction to optional. And you will not find any streaming methods or stream methods that accept even optional or any in the Java code base, something that accept optional as an argument, because it's meant to be a container designed for return types only.
And one more.
Can I use or else get with asynchronous calls that have to wait for it to return values? I didn't use it before, but I think so. Yes, you can.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this presentation.
Because it's based on the value future or callable or whatever it is you are returning. So it will wait for the value until it returns.
All right. Again, let me start that sentence. Thank you so much for this presentation.
No, it's my pleasure, and thank you very much for the questions, guys. Like, it means that my assumption that you like it, you find it insightful. So it's my pleasure. You can reach me at any time. You are welcome. We are here to you. As we always say, we are from the community to the community. Yeah. Enjoy your Java Champions Conference. Thank you, Barry, very much for moderating this session. It was amazing of you. So good luck, guys, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.